Hello. We are live, apparently. Let me know how it's looking. I'm not sure. Apparently, I've got a low bit rate, but maybe that'll improve. But let me know if everyone can hear me to start with. Clear and purple. Good to know. Thanks, Vince. Okay. Well, I'll just start, and people can catch up when they're ready. So, I thought I would do this just as a fun thing to do, and what I'm going to do is just go through some of these photos that I took. I will be the first to admit that these aren't going to be some of my best photos, but that was kind of the point. I wanted to sort of show maybe, I guess, not so much how you can recover photos, but more about how you can deal with different types of lighting conditions, because it's easy to show what you can do with ideal lighting, but when you're in a situation like we were where the lighting was very harsh, then it's one of those things where you have to sort of work around it. I don't think there is such a thing as bad light. I think it's just working with whatever light you've got. So yeah, go through a few things, how you can kind of recover exposure, as well as just my general process for editing photos like this. So if I go out on a little photo trip sort of like this, I'll just shoot pretty readily, and when I've done the input, so obviously I've done that already, but I haven't done anything else. I've had a quick look at the photos and done a couple of quick test edits and things like that, just to see what I might do, just to prepare myself. But otherwise, this is basically what I'd be presented with here in Lightroom. I do pretty much all my major editing in Lightroom, especially for sort of landscape and all that kind of stuff. Occasionally I'll take it into Photoshop, but not usually. It's only if it really needs it, if there's something missing, or if there's some advanced stuff I need to do, or maybe if I need to remove something. But the very first and the most boring thing that I do is I will actually go through and do the first process, which is culling my images. So culling images is pretty much just the process of going through and picking the shots I like and I don't like, and I generally do this pretty quickly. So I start all the way at number 1. I've got 245 photos. I think maybe I'll get 10 that are any good, if that. I'm not expecting a great result, but still. So our first shot is of Vince, who's currently watching. So say hello to Vince. He's currently in the chat. This was mostly me just testing my exposure and seeing what the light was like. And you can see obviously that he's fairly deep in shadow here, and the highlights around him are quite bright. But overall, not a terrible little portrait. I actually don't mind this, Vince. For the technical stuff for those interested. So these were all shot with the same camera, same lens. I didn't actually change lens the whole time, which kind of stinks because I brought a whole bunch of lenses with me. But I just kept with the Panasonic S1, which is a full frame. It's my sort of most recent camera I've been messing around with. I am very much liking it. It's a full frame. It's my first major mirrorless camera that I've used for photography. I've used mirrorless cameras before for video, but not for just photo work. Cool camera, and this is the basic kit lens you get with it. This is the 24-105 f4. Very good all-around lens, quite sharp. Did I say lens? Very good all-around lens. Quite sharp, even at f4, which was really good because I did shoot a lot of this stuff at f4. There have been a couple of things when I was quickly looking through that I've noticed about it that would make me maybe stop it down a little bit in the future, but overall the performance at f4 is pretty good. I mean, you can see here, this is shot at f4, 105mm. So this is the extreme here, so wide open at the fullest zoom range of 105mm. 100, ISO 100, and you can see it's quite sharp. The details are all there. Yeah, it's picked that up quite well. There's Vince with his latest acquisition, which he didn't get to fly, unfortunately. But you know, next time he'll get to fly that. Hopefully. Okay, so hey Clinton. Yeah. So anyway, so the first thing I will do is go through and cull images. So really quick process. I just using the left and right keys on the keyboard. I'll just go back and forward. So I'll select my first image, and I'll just go back and forward and pick images that I do and don't like. So obviously this is me testing out, and you can definitely see how harsh the sun was here because it's very much blown out. Okay, well, I'm just pretty much about to address that, Ben. Yeah, so how long do I decide? Not very long, so I don't spend a lot of time. Sometimes I'll do a quick, I can look at this, I can see there's a bit of motion blur. He's a bit far away. It's a cute photo, but I don't think I would keep this. So I would literally just look at this and go, yeah, it's okay, but I would just do it. And I would hit X on the keyboard in Lightroom, which sets it as rejected, which you can see there, and I would just move on. So I generally try and do, I don't know, I think first impressions matter. See, this is a better shot of Aaron too. This is nice and sharp, a bit closer up. The exposure is not too bad. I think I'll be able to recover these highlights. The highlight recovery on the S1 is quite good, so I'm pretty sure. And sometimes I will do that. I'll just go, can I recover that? And I'll just drag the highlights in just to see if I can. I can see there that I can. There's probably going to be some hot spots, but not enough to make me worry. So I know I can actually edit that. So yeah, I'll be like, yeah, that's a keeper. Look at this. Next shot, and again, I would just do a quick zoom in, you know, yeah, it's sharp. Do I like the mood? Do I like it? Does the exposure look okay? Yeah, that's pretty good. There's no sort of motion blur on there. I've obviously used a higher shutter speed, 1/250th. That looks pretty good. I'm not unhappy. Here's another one here. This one, this is just sort of meh, so I would get rid of this. You know, it's not a bad shot of Vince, but it's just the framing's off and there's a bit of distraction and all that sort of stuff, and it's just not that interesting. Yeah, highlights definitely recoverable. This is quite nice. This. It's not pin sharp, not tack sharp, but I could do a little post sharpening to bring this up. Yeah, so I might keep that. That's rubbish. Oh, that's right. There was this ant that we found that I was trying to get a shot of, but yeah, the little guy was moving too fast, and he was very angry at me. You can't really tell from the photo, but this ant was quite angry at me when I was shooting him, so I didn't want to push my luck. So again, X on both of those. Neither of those are any good, so I get rid of the rest of those. Streaming's definitely slowing down Lightroom a bit. Sorry about that. Okay, I don't know what this is. This looks like just a test shot, so remove it. It's cruddy. So I'm pretty brutal when I go through my selects and things like that. I will be pretty brutal with everything, and I won't do it now. And I'll do this where I'm going through where I can see there's like, it's why I keep the film strip up down here too, because I can see there's like 3 shots here of the same subject that I've just tried with different focal lengths, and I might go, ooh, one of these might be better than the other. It's like, that's okay, but I don't see, I can already tell that's out of focus, so I'm not going to keep that one. This one, I kind of like this. This is interesting. I like there's just this bit of light. I think there's going to be too much dead space, but yeah, it's got potential, so I'll come back to it. This one, sharp enough. And this is what I mean with that 24-105 at f4. I am noticing it's not always 100% tack sharp, but I mean, this is a rare result that I've seen here. But yeah, this is just a bit muddy there. Spider in a web, there was a few of these, but this, I know I've got better shots of this as well. I know I've got better shots of spiders in webs, and I did quite a few, so again, I would just get rid of it. Move through here. I know I did a couple of these as well, but I was definitely trying to get some of the flare in here. I think I like the other one that was closer, so I'll keep moving on. Again, see, I've done another one here. I think he's too small though. It's kind of nice, but no. Another flare. That's actually pretty cool. I like that. I'm a big sucker for lens flares. Ah, this was a little bug that was on it. I did quite a few of these, just because, shooting moving insects. I'm not very experienced at it, and you can see most of these aren't very sharp. They're a bit soft, so I'm just no, no, no. Moving insects are difficult. Not quite. If his head was in focus, maybe. But I think the first one maybe will be okay. No, missed him. Yeah, he's sharp in this one, but it's just his butt. So no, no shots at that insect. Oh well, life goes on. This is really busy, but I might use this as an example of how to recover something like this, because this is a really super busy shot. There's so much going on here, and this is very common, I find, in Australia. Yeah, lens flares are the best. Clinton, back me up. This is something I find in Australia, and it bugs me sometimes, but at other times I like it, which is just that Australian landscape is very busy. There's always a lot of plants, there's always a lot of branches, and there's just lots of stuff going on. It's never really that sort of clean sort of stuff you see coming out of England and all that kind of stuff. So this is just an example of like a typical rainforesty bush sort of shot from Australia. So I might keep this one unless one of these other ones is better. Maybe I do like the shadows and the contrast that's coming across here, but I'm not sure if I want the wider shot or this one. I think I like this composition better, even though it's very busy. And look, none of these are real keepers. And this is also just what I would call my first pass. So I might decide to get rid of some of these or come back to them. See, this I like, and this is an example of what I would generally recommend most people do when they find themselves in these kind of lighting conditions. When you find yourself in this sort of harsh light, I find it's a really a good way to compensate for it, rather than trying to shoot sort of wide landscapes like I did with this one. Sometimes it's better to just take the opportunity and focus in on the details and really play into the contrast and the shadows. Try to find interesting things. I like how the leaves are sort of lit up just here and all that sort of stuff. And I know with a little bit of editing, I can sort of bring some of that detail out and bring some of those colors together and all that sort of thing. So that's definitely a shot I would keep, and that's one I'm quite happy with. Boring. Maybe a bit boring. Definitely not that one. That one's way too boring. The perspective on this isn't too bad. I'm not sure there'll be much in there. I'll probably get rid of that eventually. Another shot of Vince, but it's soft. No, out of focus, and he's pulling a weird face. Oh, it is in focus. Sorry. Credit to the S1. It is actually sharp. It's just the preview was a bit loading still. Maybe. No, I'm not fond of the expression. Sorry, Vince. That one's gone. No. Nice texture, but no. Oh, this is a nice shot of Aaron. Definitely want to keep this one. This is good. I like this. Bit blown out there, but doesn't matter. Oop, I just rejected it by accident. Undo. It's soft. Okay. No, not interesting. Ooh, maybe? No. No. Oh, I don't mind this. I don't mind this. There's something interesting going on here with a bit of retouching. Ooh, rubbish. Again, trying to go for the details, but an example of it not really working because the details just aren't interesting. It's just a leaf, and yeah, not to my liking. No. Oh, that one's just shot us. Obviously, I've moved. It's probably a mistake. Okay, more close-ups of spiders, trying to get the lens flare in there, but it's hazed up too much, so that's no good. That's appalling. Here we go. Yeah, I definitely did a couple of this, so this might take a bit back and forth. But this one's soft. He's nice and sharp here. I'm not a very experienced insect photographer, as you might have gauged from the other ones, but this one's not too bad. I mean, I don't like how his legs are out of focus, but I do like that the majority of his body's in focus. So this one's definitely got some potential. you know, and I definitely did some other stop down. Nah, too much out of focus. I like the detail on the web, but you can see that's where my focus is. It's here instead of probably where it should be, which is here. And I probably should have shifted my perspective a little bit to get a better result. That's just a black frame. That shutter speed's too slow. Shutter speed's too slow. Still not sharp. Nah, rubbish. What is this, Mike? What were you doing? What were you thinking? Okay, so I have one out of all the photos I took. There's one. Yeah, I definitely like this one. I don't think this one's a keeper. Oh, this was this log. That's right. We were trying to see what was in this log because it was very, very dark. I might just do. Why am I in quick develop? I should go into full develop. I might just do a quick thing just for the sake. I mean, look at the amount of detail you can get. Nah, I don't think there was anything living in there, but we couldn't see anything. But if there was, it's a good thing that we didn't stick our hands in there, though. That still wouldn't have been a good idea. Okay, and moving on. Okay. Not much there. Then we get another group shot. I definitely want to start taking more of these kind of documentary style shots because I end up really liking these. I'm not happy with this. This is just amateur hour. I should definitely have had his feet higher. Yeah, it was a log. Definitely should have had his thing. But I do want to take more of these kind of documentary shots because I like these and I want to document our trips a little bit better in the future. Maybe do a bit more video as well. The only problem with this is, Ben's feet there. It's a bit small in frame. Ben's sort of sharp and in focus, but everybody else is. Vince is like halfway through blinking. Not great. This is kind of nice. Again, we're trying to go into those details. More feet pics. Yeah, more. That's for the fetish collection for you, Kane. I'll export that one for you later. This is kind of nice. This is me trying to find those little spots of light. I think there's too much rubbish in the frame, though. I might try and edit that, though. Again, that is just a blur. It's also just mostly a blur. This is Australia is it's so much detail going on here, and it's trying to capture that. And you can see I'm going for that. Like a lot of these are shot, fairly tight on the focal length. Can't send super chats. I think isn't super chat like a paid thing? Don't you have to be like a? I don't even know how super chat work. Kane, I'm sorry. That's way too advanced YouTuber for me. Too much rubbish to name my SD card that. You mean my SD card? Because you had to borrow one of mine. More flares. That one's not good. Too much flare. That was not too bad, but I think this one might be better because I think I've opened it up to f10. Yeah. There's one thing I've noticed though. It's a bit underwhelming on that 24-105. The sun stars aren't super great. I'm not sure which of these I prefer though. I think I'll go for the brighter one, even though it's got this little bit of the flare here. I like that. I like those little aberrations and stuff in the shot. This one's just a bit too dull, so the other one's got more character, so I'll keep that. Yeah. These I really like. This was quite good. This I managed to stop for a bit. The light that was hitting this log on this moss of whatever this is. I think it's a moss. It's some sort of plant life. My knowledge of flora and fauna is quite limited. But I did like the way the light was hitting this, and I know I did a couple of shots here. These ones not amazingly interesting, to be honest, but maybe that other one I'll keep. No, I'll get rid of this one. I like this. Again, compensating for the lack of things by going in tighter. And I found, you can see the next one, I found this little leaf and this nice little patch that I used to sort of compose the shot. I think maybe that one compared to this one. Yeah, I think it's just a bit too close and the leaf's just a bit too out of focus. There's a nice detail here. I mean, that definitely shows off the sharpness of the lens. But yeah, no, not totally happy with that. How do I look at it? I think I'll keep this one and this one. There was all this really interesting moss, so I did take a couple of photos of it. That one's a bit too flat on the plane. This one's not enough in focus. Too shallow, Mike. Too shallow. That's a boring shot of a leaf. Is that anything? Nope. Don't know what that was supposed to be. Nope. Not interesting. Yeah, I think the brighter one's definitely better. No, leaves. Another shot up at the sky looking at the sun. Big fan of these, but I've got a few of those, and I've definitely got better ones. That one's a bit ordinary. This one's not too bad. Maybe with a bit of work I could recover that. That one's not very interesting. And that's really what I look for, is just what's interesting. And I do try to be, like, I'm being much slower here, obviously, because I'm sort of talking my way through what I'm thinking. Normally I'd probably be done by now of my culling process. So I don't generally spend tons of time on it. I like the leaves there. But yeah, I try to go for first impressions. If something doesn't catch me, I usually get rid of it. You know, if it doesn't. The good thing is, because I'm just rejecting it and not deleting it, I can always go back to them. You know, and I sort of log everything in my memory. This has got. I kind of like the way that this little plant's being lit up here. Maybe with a bit of cropping. You know, crop out some of this rubbish here. That could come up good. Oh, I do like this one. I know I've got two of these. So it's really, maybe people can help me out and say what they prefer. I'm not sure if I want the symmetry, because I like the symmetry here. But the asymmetry is also kind of cool. So it's one of those things where this is a tricky one. Yeah, either of these, I think both of these have got potential, but it's just which perspective I like. In both cases, though, I'm going to have to remove these power lines because they're absolutely distracting. So this is something I will do in Photoshop, is remove these power lines. Yeah, it could work nice in black and white. That's what I was thinking, Vince, because it's got that sort of it's got that nice bit of contrast to it. I'm gonna keep both of these. Let me know in the comments which one you reckon, whether the symmetry on the right of 82 or the asymmetry. I kind of like the forced warping of the trees there, but I don't know. It's a tough call between either of those. What is that? Oh, that's right. It's this little lizard. There's this little lizard I was trying to get a photo of, but he hid. He was hiding away. Did I get a sharper one of him? That one does look a little bit sharper, a bit more underexposed, but I can probably bring him up a little bit. Maybe. Yeah. I might edit that just for the sake of trying to get it, because I did try to get this lizard for a while. But yeah, obviously he's stretched up in there. I liked this when I was. It's one of those situations where it's like, oh, I like this when I was looking at it, but I'm not sure I've captured it quite right. But I'll give it a go. The biggest thing, the biggest thing about Australian environments that I'll say again is just the level of messiness, and it's definitely something that about the Australian bush that I find can be a bit frustrating at times. And I think that's a personal taste thing too, because I have a preference for very clean compositions and very very clean sort of lines and things like that. So with the Australian bush, it's very chaotic. There's always mess. There's always these twigs and things just randomly in places. So it's something that I have difficulty with. But I do like the way this rock is positioned and the way the light's hitting here. So I'll come back to that one. Here we go. Okay, this is the waterfall. So a lot of these shots are going to be repeats of each other, and that's because and the contrast here was super bad, as you can tell. But the camera does capture the detail, which is nice. Oh, look, they're there and there. This is obviously just me testing out and seeing what I can get. Yeah, so these ones here, what I started to do, once I realized just how much contrast there was going to be, I decided that I would have to experiment a little bit with some bracketing So you can see I'm trying to do longer exposures here. This was supposedly a waterfall, but it was a very underwhelming waterfall. We clearly haven't had enough rain. If there'd been some more rain, this might have looked more impressive, but obviously there's barely these little twigs of water here. So this was me. I was trying to do a bit of long exposures on it. I know I messed around with a few settings, and I went for a shorter shutter, shorter exposure. Here you can see here's one that I did a bit of editing on when I was testing out to see what I would go with. So this is kind of the look I would go with. This kind of shows you the extremes to which you can push an exposure compared to what you get out of the camera. So if I go back to what came out of the camera compared to with a bit of tweaking, you can see just how much detail you can pull out there without losing too much. I mean, it is a little bit noisy in here, but you could clean that up. A bit of noise reduction would get rid of that pretty easily. Not a great shot, but I thought that was a good example of just how much detail you can actually recover in the shadows and stuff with a little bit of tweaking. And I will go through that sort of process. I might keep that just as a reference. I don't think I'll actually keep the photo, although I don't mind it. It's not terrible. Leaves and my foot. That's a nice to see. There's more foot there for you, Kane, if you wanted to see some more feet. Get rid of that. Okay, so this, I believe, is where I began to, bracket my exposures. Okay, so bracketing exposures, for those who don't know, is when it's an automated thing generally within the camera, and you set your camera up so that you can take multiple exposures, and it will automatically take 3 shots, 4 shots, 5 shots. It depends on the settings that you use, and every camera does it a little bit differently, but it basically means that it'll take a few shots quite short after each other at different exposure settings. So you sort of set your middle exposure, and then it'll take an exposure to the left and the right of that. So it'll take an exposure to that's one stop underexposed from where you set it and one stop overexposed from where you set it. And what that does is it gives you the ability to sort of combine these exposures in something like Lightroom or Photoshop, and try and get more dynamic range, which basically means just more detail in your shadows and more detail in your highlights. So I was trying to do some bracketing here, and this is me using a three stop one. So you can see that's the underexposed shot, that's the regular exposed shot, and that's the overexposed shot. And I've done this handheld, so they're going to be a little bit misaligned, which is fine because you can really easily compensate for that in Lightroom. So I don't think I'll keep these ones because I know I looked at it and went, I don't think there's going to be enough detail there. So I did go through and start doing 5 shot exposures, as you can see here, 94, 95, 96, 97, and 98. So this is where I would have set my exposure to roughly. So the highlights are a little blown out, but trying to get as balanced an exposure as I can. And then obviously it's going over to help me capture some more of these details here in the shadows. But you can see just how much contrast there was. So I'll get rid of these 3. And set flag to rejected. But I'll keep these ones, and what I'm going to do, just so I remember, because I'll use these as an example of how to do that a bit later. So I'll just set a color label on these, and I'll set them to yellow, which is what I usually use for, just an indicator for come back to this. So it's very difficult to tell which has got the best composition out of these at times, just because there is so much contrast. But I actually think this might be nice. No, I'm not a fan. So obviously I'm going to be rejecting multiples at this point, because these are all the exact same shots, but the camera's just automated the setting for me. Again, going for the details, I've done another bracket here. Less necessary to do the bracket, but I'm not sure that this is a very interesting shot anyway. If anyone knows of a shortcut that works for rejecting multiple photos at once, I would be very happy to know that, because I don't know how to do it. Because you press X, it'll only reject the photo you're looking at, which is very annoying. Okay. Again, trying to go for some detail. I did like the way the shadows were falling here. I might keep this one. Maybe. I might keep it. I'll come back to it. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I just don't like to look at it too long because, I mean, you can always push it. This one could be nice. Not super fond of the rock. Let me see if the next one's any better. The next one I've gone for a lower angle, which isn't too bad, so I might... Okay, I'll keep both of those and see which one I prefer. Oh look, I'm looking up at the sun again and getting flares. What a surprise. Not very exciting. I will get rid of those. Rejected. Yeah, I do like the ripples in those shots, yeah. Okay, so look at my overexposed one because that'll show me all the details. This... not very exciting on that one. Not very exciting. No, none of these. None of these. Get rid of all of them. I do like the composition on this one. This is one that I definitely want to try and recover. Probably won't use that overexposed frame because you're getting just too much flare there. It's just way too much. It's overpowering. It'll be interesting to see how well this recovers because there is so much motion in the water, and whether the auto stitching will work. But even just this frame here might be okay. And that's the other thing about bracketing that's quite good is sometimes you don't need to do the combining the frames together to do the high dynamic range stuff. It could just be, oh no, one stop below was better, or two stops below was actually really nice. That shot, that version of the shot is better, and it just does it. It's an automated process. So I definitely recommend trying bracketing when you're in this sort of high contrast environment, because it can really help get just a bit more detail out of your shadows. What is this crap? Ugh, this isn't going to work. The problem is, I'm not sure. I have to do more research because it's obviously a new camera to me, and I never used bracketing on this particular camera before, so I didn't know how to set it up 100% correctly, and it was bracketing using my shutter speed, which meant that the shorter exposures, sometimes there's going to be too much motion blur in there. Sorry, the overexposed stuff, it's obviously gone to, I mean, this is 1/100, so obviously my hands just aren't set steady at this point. So there might be too much motion blur in it, or something like that, which is going to make them not very good. I mean, this is rubbish anyway. I wouldn't keep this anyway. I think I did this twice. Maybe this one's a bit better. Maybe there's a shot in here that is recoverable there. I kind of like what I was going for, but I think it's just, unless there's one here. That's actually, maybe I'll keep that one. Let's see the one before it. Ooh. I might keep these two and see which one I like better a bit later. Okay, set these to rejected, and I'll set these to rejected. Okay. Another variation of the other shot. This one I've gone a bit tighter, a bit more of the sky. I think I like this one better as an overall composition, but yeah, I'm tempted to keep both. I see now, I've already seen this when I'm shooting it, and you can see I've tried that. So I think that longer look is probably a better version of this, so I'll get rid of these. Okay. Cool. Alright. God, this is so much slower when you're talking, when you're doing it. Oh, much better. Okay, these just, the shutter speed's just too low by the looks of it for this to work. Yeah, no, what is this, Mike? What were you thinking? I'll have a quick look at this one. It could have been nice, but no, I didn't capture that right. And this is an example of doing things very casually too. Now again, I don't know if I'll combine these, but there might be a nice version where I like the way it's fitting, but I'm not very hopeful at this point. No, wrong button, sorry. No, nothing there that I like. No, I don't like any of those. Here we go. So this is trying it. I quite like this actually. I think there might be a way to recover this. This shot could come up well. I think I've just gone for a bit of a straighter angle there. Just gonna compare. I think I like that one better. Rejected. Okay. Another one trying to look at the sky. Don't know what that's about. What are you doing, Mike? Rejected. Ooh. There's something nice here. I like this color, but I think that the water dripping down here, even when the shot is starting, it's just distracting. And I might keep one of those. I might keep this frame. It seems to be the most balance between the two. Have a quick look at this one. Yeah. I think I'll get rid of the other ones. I don't think I'll try combining those. Yeah, so this is me trying to just focus on that, but yeah, ends up being too misty. Gonna get rid of those, but I think I gotta get rid of this one too. That's Ben climbing down. Ah yes, did a couple of shots of Ben while he was doing his own photos from this angle, using his phone like a regular person. Not sure what that's about. Okay, now with these ones, I might keep that one. I'm pretty sure I got a better version, but so a lot of these I'm gonna get rid of just because what he's doing isn't particularly interesting. And this is me sort of just waiting for him to do interesting stuff, so I'm just taking lots of shots as he's doing things, waiting for him to sort of be in a more interesting pose. That one maybe. So I'll get rid of everything between there. Reject. And I mean, I'm definitely not happy about how overexposed that bit is, but you know, I might just crop it and get rid of that. Lens flare there, something, get rid of it. It'll be fine. So I don't really see any of these. None of these would be keepers. And I've obviously noticed my exposure being a little bit too bright in those other shots, and I've gone for, again, I'm doing bracketing. Whether these will work or not is going to be tricky because, again, he's a moving subject. So it's all up to sort of how still he stays, and whether or not there's any motion blur. But I don't mind the framing here. Let's have a look at the next batch. I think I like the way the log's frame, but yeah, but I don't like his action there. So okay, so I get rid of this set. Definitely want to try and keep this just because the pose is nice. Yeah, definitely want to try and hopefully there's enough detail. It's still even a bit, even underexposing by 2 stops, it's still a little bit overexposed there. But that's okay. I should be able to recover that when I come back to it. No. I believe I did bracket this, okay. I think I bracketed that because I forgot to turn the bracketing off. I'm not sure what I saw in this pool, but I'm not seeing it now. No. I think what I was going for was this light. Actually, this, maybe, I'll keep that one. Maybe I can do something with it. I do like the dappling of the light through the trees. I have so many of these shots. It's good, but I have so many shots like that. There's a nice shot of Ben taking a photo. A bit underexposed, but I think I can recover it. There's so much dynamic range in this camera. Well, I like the texture there. Again, a bit underexposed, but that'll be okay. And this will be a good example of to see how much detail we can actually pull out of all this, which essentially looks black, but I can guarantee you it's not too black. But you can see there, if I look at the this little tool here in Lightroom, when you click the show shadow clipping, and there's also one for highlights. Highlights will be red, but by default highlights are red and shadows are blue, so it shows you where you've basically got no detail or no dynamic range, or where basically you've got pure black. But you know, even if I just start pulling these shadows up here, you'll see that start to decrease. But yeah, I can already see that it's. I mean, it's amazing the amount of detail we can pull out of shadows these days. It's insane. Just how much we can recover blows me away. But anyway, I'm going to reset that. When I remember how. Oh, there it is. It's gone away to the left there. Okay. But I definitely want to have a go at that. Okay, so that's what I'll do. That's my culling process, and that took 45 minutes. Sorry. It took a lot longer than it normally would take me. But now that I've culled all my images, then I'll go through and start doing tweaks and seeing what works with the edits, and I'll usually cull a few more. And the reason why I use that rejected thing, and you can see these grayed out ones, is because then I can go down here to the filters, okay, which will filter based on flag status. If I press the middle one, the middle flag here, okay, it'll show me just photos that have no flags on them. Now, because I didn't do a pick type flag or anything like that, I just rejected, it's showing me basically everything except what I've rejected. Okay, including those ones that I marked with the yellow color. And I will use the colors and stuff to usually I use yellow to say this needs further editing, or I have to take this into Photoshop or something like that, just as a little visual reminder. And green is usually when it's done or it's a completed image ready for export. Yeah, so I've taken my 245 down to 80 shots just by doing this, and there will be a lot less because there's quite a few of those here, which are obviously brackets, so I'm not going to keep all 5 of those sets of images. But yeah, we have our images. So now I would go to actually start editing them. So I go all the way to the start and start doing the edits. So what just to show you a quick thing that I do to speed myself up that I won't do this time, is I actually have a preset that I've made for myself here, which is this thing here on the on the left there, which is called TVK Look 01. That's just my own preset that I've made up, with a bunch of the general settings, you know, the type of colors I like to work with, all that sort of stuff. It's a good baseline that I'll use for you know, editing images. And yes, Sorry about that. Sorry, just got distracted for a moment. I had a message. Yeah, so that is what I would generally do, is I would apply that look and then I would adjust from there based on the shot, because you can see it's not quite right, but it's not, if I use this preset, it's going to be difficult to sort of see exactly what I've done to get to this point. And I probably want more saturation and stuff in there if I was to use that. But yeah, so normally I'd use a preset, and that just speeds me up because it gives me a baseline to work from that I know, that I should be doing things. But even discounting that, what I will generally do, because that preset doesn't work for everything, that preset generally only works for landscapes and stuff, or urban sort of stuff. As you can see, it's kind of desaturating everything a bit much, and everything looks a little bit too dull with that preset applied. So I probably wouldn't use that. Yeah, I probably wouldn't use that preset on these anyway. But what I would do is go through and sort of do the first edit to one of the images, and then I'll use those settings and start pasting them across them as another way to save time. Anyway, I'm babbling. So what I would generally do here is first of all, I would crop. So with cropping, there's a few different things I would go through. Usually just by looking at an image, I can tell what kind of crop I would use, if I'm going to crop at all. You don't always have to crop. I have a preference between either the standard aspect ratio of the camera, which is 3:2, 1:1 for square frames, like for Instagram and stuff, that's good, or profile pictures, or just anything where you want a bit of symmetry. Square is good, and that could work quite well as a square crop. There could be a decent profile image for Vince. Or 8:10, which is what I will use for more portraity sort of work like this. So this could work as an 8:10 if I just want something a bit taller. So yeah, that's quite nice as an 8:10 there. Actually, I do like that. I mean, there's a bit too much headroom. And that's what I do. I sort of mess around with either of those three presets. And one of the good things about 8:10 is 8:10 is really good for Instagram. That's the standard portrait height for Instagram. And obviously a lot of images I do for this kind of stuff I post on Instagram, so that's quite nice. No, this isn't. I think I might go for an 8:10 on this, just to be focused here. Yeah, that's quite nice, and it's 24 megapixels. So I've got plenty of room to play around with this. Okay. So once I have a crop I'm happy with, that I might change later. The white balance is usually pretty good. I usually set my camera to auto white balance by default, and it usually does a pretty damn good job. But if you can try doing the auto setting. See, I find the auto setting in Lightroom has just made that all way too blue and magenta-y. I like the warmth of whatever Panasonic has chosen, but he is a little bit cool. I might warm it up just a touch. Not too much. I think now we're blowing out. The difference is we got two quite different color temperatures, because he's in the shade, so it's a bit cooler, and then obviously the background is a bit warmer. So what I'm probably going to have to do is actually do a split white balance on that. So I'll get to that later. But yeah, I'll try and bring out the shadows a bit, bring down some of the highlights, although I don't mind it blooming a bit because it's giving nice sort of background separation. I'll bring down the highlights a little bit. Get a bit more sharpness by just a little bit of texture there, so it's putting that texture at 11. So let me double check something. Sorry, I'm getting a warning here. Okay, so it says my bitrate has dropped a bit, so let me know if it's not sort of appearing quite nicely for you guys as well. Yeah, I haven't seen anyone say anything in chat for a little bit either, so just let me know to make sure that's still working. Okay. Anyway, I'll continue on as if it is anyway. So yeah, so just added a bit of texture, and that's just going to sharpen out some of the details. You can use the built-in sharpening filter if you want more specific stuff, but I find just the texture is quite nice, especially because my next step is usually to just push the clarity down a bit, because I find, like you'll see if I push it to the extreme here, clarity just softens everything and sort of reduces your midtones down, and obviously I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, I like that because it gives it a nicer sort of, especially for portrait sort of stuff like this. It's softening things up like that is nice. Um, Saturation, I might pump it a little bit. Those greens are probably a bit distracting, but I'll fix those individually. Maybe a bit of vibrance. And again, just to be clear too, what you're seeing on the stream may be a little bit different, unfortunately, from what is I'm looking at. The colors might be a bit different just because of your monitor, and obviously then the video encoding for the stream. So I apologize if it's sort of like it might seem like it's like super high contrast or something like that, but yeah, it's obviously very difficult to make this look good on every single screen. And I know my monitor I'm using currently is a little bit desaturated, so if it seems like I'm pushing the colors a bit much, I probably am. And when I go to double check these images later on a color corrected monitor, I'll probably notice that. But anyway, the colors here look quite good to me. I'll do a tone curve on this just because I generally always do a nice little tone curve, which is I always pull up my blacks a bit, so my blacks aren't, pure black. They're always like a little bit gray. And do what we call an S curve, so bring those shadows down here. I bring my highlights down too, and then actually, boost them up a little bit. So this is me basically creating a bit of contrast in the image. Oh crap, I didn't select the point. Creating a bit of contrast in the image, right? Just like that. Okay, so that's obviously too much contrast. And again, I'm sort of battling the two here. It has done some mucky stuff with his skin tones there, but that's okay, I'll fix that. In the next step, which is when I mess around with my colors here. Okay, so the HSL controls and your color controls here are definitely some of the most powerful things within Lightroom, and they're one of the things that I probably use the most in terms of trying to get the image that I like out of it. So what these allow you to do is adjust the hue, saturation, and luminance of, or lightness as some people call it, but luminance I believe is the correct term, luminance of all your different colors. Okay, so your red, your orange, your yellow, your green, your aqua, your blue, purple, magenta. And these really allow you to isolate and fix certain colors. So one thing I'm noticing here is in the background, there's a little bit of this yellow in all the plant life, which could be nice, some people might like it. I find it's just a little bit too visually distracting with the yellow as well as the green. So what I'll do is I'll usually shift the yellow. So using the hue, I'll shift the yellow more towards green to sort of balance that together. And so now we get sort of a little less, a bit more of like a springtime look to the grass, But at the same time, it's still a bit too busy here because it's very highly saturated because it's obviously so brightly lit in the background. So at the same time, I would then go and pull down the saturation of the greens a little bit just to make them so that basically because they're distracting us from Vince here, and Vince is our subject. And I'd also desaturate the yellows a little bit as well. Okay, you wouldn't go too far, but just to bring that out. And the luminance as well, I could bring it down and really darken those greens as well to bring more sort of isolation if I want to. But I like them being a little bit bright because it kind of gives the shot its mood. I think that sort of that summery kind of day. So I'm going to keep that how it is. Skin tones are one of the most important things to keep track of and correct. So usually the red and the orange is where your skin tones are going to lie. So, if I push my reds a bit more towards orange, you can actually see it's corrected a lot of that's way too far, obviously, just showing you the extremes. That's, shifted those sort of little blemishes out of his skin there that have happened from messing around a little bit with the white balance. So I'll usually just push it a little bit, the reds a little bit over towards orange, and the oranges, depending on which way we sit, I might go towards red a bit more, but his skin's a bit too red, so I go a bit more towards yellow just to create a bit more of a natural tone for his skin. And then the magentas as well, I might push a bit towards red, and that'll make the sort of magenta-y stuff here up closer to where it should be. And again, I can play with the luminance of those as well. So I can bring up the luminance of, say, the orange, which is where his skin tones are going to be. And that's going to brighten that up. And maybe the reds as well. Okay. And that, just without, like, that's not doing any skin work, not doing any retouching, that has, if I go back to before I did any of those hue saturation adjustments, you can already see that we've made some pretty significant changes. He's standing out a bit more, his skin's a bit nicer and a bit cleaner. You know, and again, it's not about people having, you know, bad skin or imperfections, because everyone's got bad skin and imperfections. You know, you do enough photography, you realize that nobody's got perfect skin. It's more about getting rid of distracting things. So, you know, if he's got a little bit of a spot on his nose or something like that, that might be distracting, or it takes my interest away. But there might be other things, like he's got a little bruise on his arm here. I could remove that, but it's not distracting me from what I think is important in the image. So I'm not so much worried about getting rid of that, and I wouldn't really touch that. Yeah. So I probably play around with some more of those settings, but I'm pretty happy with where that's sitting at the moment. I think it's still a little dark where he is, but that's okay. The color grading stuff, this is actually fairly new. I mean, it's always been here, but they've very much changed the layout for the color grading. I don't use this a lot, even in whether it was the old way or the new way. The new way is definitely a lot better, and it makes me want to use it a bit more. But I tend to find these are a bit too stylized for me, and a bit too global in their changes, because what they'll do is, so I've got the shadows here, this is my shadows wheel. I can make all of my darker shadows, you know, have a certain hue to them. So, you know, I might want to go for a sort of teal and orange look, which is very common for sort of outdoorsy stuff or whatever. You know, so I might put a bit of teal in there, hold down shift, and that'll help adjust it as well. It's a good little tip. You know, and then in my highlights I might add like a bit of orange, you know, and that'll obviously plays with you know, your complementary colors and things like that. And that give you quite a nice look, but that's, I think that's a bit more stylized than what I'd go for with this type of thing. And I honestly think the changes can be a bit too extreme with these filters. I know people who are like really good with them and are like masters of these kind of things, and they love using these settings for all sorts. But for me, I prefer to do it in the more controlled way in the HSL sliders here than to try and do it with that. It always comes out a bit Instagram filtery for me, so I generally don't do it. So I reset those just by double clicking or reset. Ooh, come on, there we go. Yeah, double click to reset your settings there. I think that's good. Okay. Yeah, you can change blending and balance and all that sort of stuff. You can mess around with these, but again, it's not something I do, so I don't really feel right talking about it a lot. Detail and sharpening. This doesn't need a lot of sharpening. I think it's sharp enough. If I wanted to, I could use hold down Alt and you drag this little masking slide here. You can basically go, okay, so all the areas that are white are what it's going to sharpen, and everything that's black it won't try and sharpen. I generally recommend pushing the masking slider all the way to the end, because if you are going to do any sharpening, you only want it to be sharpening just the elements that you need. And you can see a little bit of sharpening applied by default, and I can push that up. If you hold Alt on this as well, it also shows you it in black and white, which is actually really helpful because it allows you to show it. So I could definitely like bring up the overall sharpness of this a lot, and it'll bring out those details a bit more, and it doesn't look too bad, but the image is already sharp, and I don't like to do a lot of digital sharpening, so I think I'd probably leave it where it was. Then there's noise reduction, which I won't need to do on this, but that would just help me reduce noise, and I'll do that on some of the later images. Yeah, so pretty happy with that overall. What I might try and do though is, just because I want to try and fix a little bit of the exposure and the white balance here. So what I would do is I would go up here to the adjustment brush. Okay, and I just really roughly do a bit of a, just draw on top of Vince here. If I click this, you'll be able to see what I'm drawing. I normally wouldn't do that, but it just gives you a bit. So I can just sort of paint Vince here, just so I can just select him out of this, and I can refine this mask a bit later, but for now this will do. And then I can do two things. So I can bring up the overall exposure a bit just on Vince. So I'm only affecting, when I adjust the sliders now, I'm only affecting the bits that were painted in there. So I can bring him up just a touch, and I've still got the same sliders. And I might try warming him a bit just to correct, and adding a little bit of green to my tint, because his shirt looks a little bit magenta to me, so I'm correcting the other way. So by basically, if things look a little bit greenish, then you push it towards magenta. If things look a little bit magenta, you push it towards green. Same with orange and blue on your temperature. So if things look a little bit cool or cold, you push it towards orange and it warms the image up. Other way around, you know, if things are looking a bit too warm, then you push it towards blue. Or I can't remember if I said that twice, but you know what I mean. Yeah, and you can do lots of other things here. You know, I might find now that I've increased the exposure that the saturation is too high, it's too colorful, or I might need to go back and do some other settings, but I think that's okay. What I might do though is, I notice I've brightened up things a little bit too much, so I'll hold down Alt, and what that's going to do is it'll, you know, just reverse it. So I might try and just do a little bit less on his shoulder there, so that those highlights don't blow out. And just, I've got a nice feathered edge on this, because you know, if his hat's a bit warm, that's okay. Just adjust those things there. Okay, cool. Again, this is why I don't generally use the mask overlay, because I can't really see what I'm doing, what effect it's having. But you can see that's gotten rid of that little bit of hot spot that was there, and brighten things up. I still probably want, I think, a little bit shadow though. You know, I don't want the whole thing to be that well exposed, so I'm just going to do a quick pass there with just paint out a little bit of the bottom here, just to stop these bits here being a bit distracting. Okay, and just to keep my focus on Vince and his face here. Okay, so keep these areas sort of in shadow. Okay, cool. So looking at that, I'm pretty happy with it, but I am gonna just select my mask again. You can always go back and edit it, you know, just find where you started the mask. I think I've maybe pulled the exposure up a bit, and I'll just pull it back. Okay, and that's pretty much, like, that'd be pretty much our final image. That's probably way more time than I'd spend on it, and I would do that a lot quicker in most situations. But yeah, that's an example of kind of what I do for that sort of shot. Probably good to sort of do a before, okay, and then an after. And that's the sort of the final image. I think I tweaked this a bit. I think it looks a little artificial, the light on his face at the moment. So I probably have spent some more time to balance that out. And yeah, it looks a little bit artificial at the moment. I would definitely spend some more time fixing that up. But for a general shot, that's pretty good. So let's do the opposite for Aaron's one. Let's try and do something that's a bit quicker and a bit simpler without going to that kind of level of detail that I would go to there. Because I want these to match though, what I will do is I will just go to the develop settings here, and I will copy all the settings from here, right? And what I'll copy is the treatment, the profile, the white balance, the basic toning, tones, textures, clarities, dehaze, sharpening. Maybe not always the sharpening, because that's very shot dependent. Yeah, I would take that off. The color grading, I wouldn't select the local adjustments, because the local adjustments are what I was doing with painting his face and all that sort of stuff. Obviously that's going to be different in every image, so I'm going to get rid of that. Any noise reduction, I wouldn't copy that over, because they're all going to have different noise levels, because I've probably shot them at different ISOs. Lens corrections as well. I mean, I could do it for this because I shot it all with the same lens, but if you're always using different lenses, you obviously wouldn't want to do that. I didn't go into some of those settings either, some of those more scientific things like chromatic aberration removal and stuff, mostly because I can't see anything bad here, and because that's just a whole different kettle of fish. Effects, I mean, I won't for this one, but I might for certain ones. Process version should stay on, and calibration should stay on, but I definitely wouldn't have spot removal or crop. Okay, anything that's going to be very dependent on the individual image itself, I would not copy over, but almost everything else does. So I copy all the settings, and then when I move on to this one, I would go to my develop, right click, go to develop settings, and go paste. Okay, and if I just do a quick back and forth here, you can see that those two images match pretty well. I think this one looks a little less saturated, but those two images already match. So as a set, if I was to put these side by side, that would be pretty good. You can definitely see there's a few other things about this image, like there's way more highlights here, so I have to really pull back those highlights and maybe even the exposure. You can see I'm recovering the highlights quite well. That's gone. That spot on his head's never going away. Bring up the shadows as much as I can. Try and get a nice quick balance between the two, and maybe put a bit of clarity in here, because this one might be a bit too soft. No, I like where it is. Cool. Maybe do a bit of dehazing on there to give us a bit of contrast. Yeah, I mean that's pretty good. That's fine. That's almost what I do. I probably crop this a bit. I wouldn't go for an 8x10 on this though. This looks like a square shot to me. Yeah, maybe a bit less headroom. That's quite nice. Maybe I'll do some more work on this a bit later and try and bring out this side of his face a bit more if I wanted to do that kind of thing. But this is pretty nice. Get a bit more haze in there. And yeah, so you know, the colors are going to match, the greens are going to be kind of the same, you know, and we can already see a big difference one to the other there. Okay, and it's got a bit of a style to it, and it's why, see, at this point I think I would just overexpose it and not care about the fact that those highlights on his head are blown out. Whatever, sometimes it looks better with the highlights blown out. Okay, anyway, I'll move on. I'll try and get through some more of these. I don't want to be spent forever doing it. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paste the settings. Now, obviously, because this is a very different lighting environment, it hasn't quite popped as much as the other ones, because these were, you know, had bright backgrounds, but very sort of dark foregrounds. Whereas this is kind of, there's bright spots in there, but mostly it's. So I would definitely want to bring up the exposure a little bit, but bring down the highlights to take the edge off some of these. Here's definitely a clear-cut case of something I want to do as like a tall 8x10, just to cut out those distracting elements, so that we're just focused on the, you know, the walk. And this is sort of an example of kind of like a storytelling shot, right? I definitely want a bit more saturation in there, because we've lost a bit of the color. I probably adjust some of my colors in here as well, because I'm not so worried about skin tones now. I mean, it's still got to be nice, but it's mostly about the bush and the leaves and stuff in this one. So I would do a bit of different treatment here. Bring up some of those warm tones, pop the color of the bag there a bit. Desaturate a bit of that red. Pop those greens a bit more so they stand out. Change the hue. I can push the green a little bit more towards a bluey cyan-y sort of green, and that will again just give them a nicer look. Bring the luminance of them up a bit, maybe a bit down. Yeah, there's not a super amount of detail. I might pump my blacks a little bit, add a little bit of mid-tone contrast, pull out a bit of mid-tone contrast, sorry. increase the texture, get some sharpening. I might pull my shadow tones down a bit, just a touch. Just they're less milky now, but it makes for a bit of a nicer shot. Maybe add some warmth. Yeah, that's looking nice. Okay, so quite a different treatment to the other ones, but it's still going to match okay. And I think now that I've warmed it up, I've now got too much saturation in my oranges. So I'm going to pull that back a bit, just a little bit there. Yeah, that's nice. The blues as well. I might pull this. Ooh, that's the purple. The blues as well. I might pull a bit of saturation out just to get a bit of balance. I mean, ideally you want to be working with like 2 to 3 colors overall, like as your primary kind of colors. And that helps, especially when you've got busy environments like this, that helps sort of bring everything consistently. So if I've mostly oranges and greens, in this particular image, and I don't want too much of that blue influencing things. So yeah. Anyway, not the most inspiring shot, probably too much headroom. Nah, actually no. You want to get a scale in the environment, so I think I'll keep it a bit taller like that. I'm not quite happy with the shadows. I might pull them up just a bit. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Another one. Again, I would still use the same preset, so I'd still go through and paste the settings. As my nice starting point. See, now that I've done a bit of the edits to it, the magenta, the purples, and bring out the saturation there a bit. Bring up the luminance of them, make them pop a little bit. I might even want to change them to be a bit of a bluer color or a bit more of a pinky color. Probably more of that sort of bluish color, but you don't want to change it too much because then it becomes not the flower anymore, right? I don't want to spend a lot of time on this one though. It's not an amazing shot. It's okay. it's bearable, but it's fine. What I would do with this is definitely do some sharpening because I know that it's not quite tack sharp. I didn't quite nail the focus on it. So again, I would bring it all the way to 100, right? And you can see when it's at 100, it's only sharpening just the leaves and the details, which is all I really would want to sharpen. You get a little preview down here, but it's such a small area. You can click and select where you want to show. if you have, it's good for picking someone's eye or something. But I honestly find it's quicker to just zoom in here to 100%, and then I would just hold down Alt again, just to add a bit more sharpening. Yeah, you can see I've just missed the focus there entirely, but that's okay. Not an amazing shot, probably won't keep it. Okay, this is an interesting one. I might try adding the preset to this, but I don't think I'll keep it because this environment's so different. Yeah, you can see. I like the color though, so I am going to keep it. I am going to keep that in there, but this seems like a black and white image to me. Okay, so what I'll generally do is sort of push it and go, okay, where's how much detail have I got? And I can see I've actually, in the shadows, I've got quite a lot of detail there, right? So I know I can push this a little bit further than I might otherwise. There's definitely too much room at the top here. Way too much room. So I would crop it down. But I do kind of want a bit of that negative space. I don't want this to be entirely just focused on the rock. So I do kind of want a little bit of that. Maybe bring it up here. Something like that. Yeah, that's not looking too bad. Looks look at it in black and white. Yeah, something about it's nice in black and white. And then I might use my tools here. And when you can't see the colors anymore, it can be a little annoying. But what I can do is there's this adjust luminance by dragging photo, and you can do this for all 3 settings. So I can grab this and select. If I click on an area, it will, when you've got colors on, obviously, it will just adjust the luminance of that particular color. So instead of pretending, I'll show you. So if I was like, the greens are a bit too bright, I can click and drag up with the mouse or down with the mouse to sort of make them a bit less hot like that. And that's a good little way to do it. I don't always like to use this because generally I prefer to slide each color at a time, because if you pay attention on the right hand side with the sliders, you can see it's actually moving the yellow at the same time, because there's obviously a bit of yellow in those as well. So that can change other colors in your image that you weren't intending. So I generally don't do that a lot. But it is something you can do. But yeah, it's good for when you're trying to adjust a color and it's like, no, this color's not adjusting the way it is. You can't quite find what you're looking for. It might be just because there's a weird combination of a few colors in there and you need to select it before it'll do it. Like you can see the yellows need to come up at the same time. Again, so I'll adjust the hue here. Okay, go for a bit more of a green. I'm less happy with this shot the more I play with it. Less and less happy with it. Warm it up a bit. I'm thinking it might be a black and white image. I convert my process to black and white. I'm just not happy because it's not actually really sharp down here. There's a couple of ways you can recover this. Like I can, especially in black and white, you can really push up your shadows a bit like that. Go for a bit more of that kind of artistic look. Really mess with your S-curve. Try and get something a bit nicer. Now I think the shadows are a bit too milky. I think ultimately framing is my biggest issue with this. I just think the frame is too wide. You know, there's too much negative space. It'd be okay if it was maybe, I've done that too high. It was probably okay if it was something like this, but because it's obviously so on the edge of the frame, it's not in focus or anything like that. So it's just not working for me. Yeah, so I was initially hoping to do something with this, but no. So now I will just reject that because I don't want to look at it again. I'm done with it. It's out of my life. Just because, you know, not enough of that was right for me. So here we go. We got some more of these lens flare photos. I wouldn't want to spend a lot of time with this. Again, I might just quickly chuck that thing on that I got from before, which, you know, beautifies my colors. That's quite nice. I probably mess around with my whites a bit here. Bring the blacks up just a tad. Create a little bit more contrast. This is another one where I might have a quick look at it in black and white. No, too much in there in black and white. I think the color works really nicely here. I like the way that the colors are all bouncing off each other. You know, I do like it's weird. It's one of the few lenses where I think the Sunstars look better when you're at a wider aperture than when you're at a more closed aperture. Generally, it's the other way around. Generally, you want to be at like f8 or something for a good looking what do you call it, Sunstar. But at f4, the Sunstars, I think I've been the most happy with them. I quite like that. It's probably not an image I'd ever publish, but I think it's quite nice. I'm happy with it. I wouldn't want to do too much more to it though. So let's just paste some of these settings here. Yeah, okay, again, I don't want to bring these shadows down a bit. Maybe warm this up. That's a bit nicer. Maybe bring a bit more so. Bring those shadows. Get a bit of more of that tone. Really bring out the rays. Not terrible. Actually, in black and white, what I'm seeing is this. There we go. Yeah, I like that. Maybe even in color, it'll still work. Nice. It's one of the things, like when you go to black and white, you can see all those little highlights stand out and stuff, whereas they don't really when you're in color, and it's just a bit too messy. But in black and white, that I really like that. I love the way the highlights are bouncing up here. The fact that this stuff's in shadow doesn't ruin anything, and I think it looks quite good. And I think that's quite a nice little look. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Okay. Yeah. Again, probably not a shot I'll ever publish, but it's nice, you know. Okay. So now we get to the good stuff. Now we get to kind of what the topic I kind of set for this stream was. The stream that's now been going for quite some time. So, how do I recover a lot of this detail, especially considering I'm just working with one exposure? When you're shooting, one of the main things to remember is try and keep your ISO or your sensitivity low. So try and use a low ISO, base ISO. Some cameras have different, you know, base ISO. Some of them are 200, 400, whatever. Generally 100's your base, but whatever your lowest setting is, that's generally your camera's base ISO. It can vary. But you can do reading and work it out for each individual camera. 100 is good on the S1 for photography for sure. In video, I tend to go a bit higher, about 400. Yeah, so base ISO, because that's going to give you generally the most dynamic range. It depends on the situation, but it's a good rule of thumb. Try and expose for the highlights, because you're always going to have a lot more latitude with your shadows than your highlights. So it's always going to be easier to do this, where I push those shadows up. Not a great deal of difference there, but it's always going to be more recoverable doing that than it will be trying to recover highlights. Highlights just are generally less recoverable than shadows are. So it's just a good rule of thumb. If I do the exposure here and pull everything up, and then I pull the highlights down, I can actually, you can see, I can actually recover quite a bit of detail in there if I wanted this to be a nice even flat exposure. But one of the things, I think it's one of the mistakes that I see fairly often is when people have got a strong contrast shot like this, they try and make it so that everything's exposed, so the shadows and everything's too even. And what that does is it kind of makes everything look a bit too flat, and it doesn't sort of embrace that there are shadows, and you kind of lose some of these points of interest. Now, when you're doing a portrait or whatever, and you know you're trying to get detail of someone's face or something like that, that might be desirable. But for something like this, where it's overall a bit less important that it's like that, don't always try to just bring everything out. It's not about being even. It's about having a good looking shot. Anyway, so I'll stop babbling and I'll sort of move on to try and do things. So with something like this, what I would generally do first is I would push my highlights down and pull my shadows all the way up. Okay, and then I'll mess around with my exposure until I get it somewhere where it all looks kind of nice and balanced. And it has this weird effect when you do it this way, because it kind of looks, I like it. I think it's interesting. It kind of looks like a painting when you do this sort of effect, because everything kind of goes into this weird sort of grays and interesting tones. So you get this very painterly kind of look to it. It's interesting when you balance those out. But it also looks like cheap HDR, and I'm not a big fan of that. It looks like that sort of automatic HDR setting you used to get out of your sort of your phones and stuff like that. Apologies, just a bit caught up on my cable there. So yeah, not a super fan of it, but I have messed around with this look before with some similar types of shots and managed to make it look quite nice actually. But it does take a bit of work to do that, and it is a very specific look that I generally don't go for, but I've done as an experiment. So again, I'll mess with my curves to try and get a bit more pop in there, a bit more contrast. Okay. Pull the vibrance down. The vibrance is the saturation of the shadows. Colors in the shadows is how you can think of vibrance. Whereas saturation is kind of overall all the colors, right? You can super saturate it like that and it looks appalling. I do only very minor adjustments to my saturation, either above or below, because I can individually saturate colors, and I find that way more effective by using, again, the HSL or the color points here. I sorry, my contrast a bit. Again, maybe it's looking a little bit too flat. Alright, bring the highlights back. I want more bright, a couple of those little bright spots to stand out, and I want a bit of depth to my shadows. So I'm going to bring these back in and try and bring the middle of my curve around a bit. Okay, I look at it in black and white for a sec, not because I think I want this to be, I actually want this to be in color, but I find it can be good to look at it if you're having trouble and something's not quite working for you. Just take saturation down, take all your color out, and just look at the image in black and white like this, and it shows you where your shadows are and where your bright spots are, and as you adjust these things, it starts to sort of simplify it for you, and you start to look at it just on very simple terms. So I'm finding that as I crush the shadows here, now that I've done a bit of S-curving and adjusted my contrast, that it's actually looking quite nice, and it's quite moody. And I don't mind how it looks at this point. You know, it's still very busy, and it's definitely not a shot that I put on my wall. But you can see I'm getting something out of it. I'm going to do a crop here, just because that rocks a bit too much in my frame. But cancel. But I don't like. I think that's too short. I think 8x10 is too short for this shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to as shot, and I'm just gonna bring it up. It's just this bit of the rock down here that's bothering me. Yeah, that's a bit nicer, a bit more centered in the frame. Okay, and I will dehaze a bit. Okay, yeah, that's looking pretty good. There's blacks in. Okay, and then I'll bring my color back. Okay, and you can see I've made a lot of changes. Okay, so we've gone from something that was very contrasty, very sort of dark, but pulled all this detail out of it. And there's definitely something to work with here. So now again, I'll go for my hues. Definitely want to push those yellows a bit towards the greens just to make it less complex, because there's so much going on in this shot that all the color differences are going to be very distracting. You know, because I could go the other way. You know, I could make this like a really autumny shot by going more towards the yellow with the leaves. I just don't like that look as much. I prefer greens in my leaves, which is a bad thing in Australia because everything's yellow here. But it does work. So again, I push some of my oranges a bit more towards that yellowy green tone as well. Just the yeah, so you could do that sort of autumny look. Just my greens. You don't want to go that far. It starts to look fake, but a little bit more into that blue. I think the luminance of the greens, they might need to just darken a bit, and then the oranges just a touch, just to bring out the detail. Saturation on the oranges could go up to, all this ground color here is it's getting a bit lost now. You can see it's like, this is all my oranges, and you just can't see them at the moment. Or I could change the luminance, bring it up a bit, but you can just see there's so little in there. There's probably a bit of red in those tones as well. Oh, not as much as I would have thought. So again, maybe those oranges I've pushed too far towards yellow and green, because there's now not enough separation. So maybe I'll push them a bit more towards red. I should bring my saturation back up so you can actually see the changes. Yeah, maybe if I push these a bit more towards red instead of towards yellow like I had done, you can see now there's going to be a bit more separation. There's going to be a bit more, if I show you when I'm zoomed out. If we go to there, you can see it's a bit muddy, it's all the same color. And now we've added some red in there, and that's a bit nicer. Maybe I can you can saturate the oranges a bit to really make them pop. Bring down the greens, make the greens less distracting, make it a bit more monochromatic overall, but I think I like the greens popping, so I'm going to keep them up a bit higher. The blue, I might take down a bit, just because it's again, it's an extra color that's distracting. Maybe shift it a bit more towards that teal, so it blends with the greens a bit. Yeah, look around, and then just look around for any of these other things, you know, and you can see that we've made a few fairly significant changes there. We've gone from this to this, you know, which is a perfectly usable shot now. I think it's way too busy. There's too many twigs and there's too many bits going on. It's not clean enough for me, but a lot of people I think would be quite happy with a shot like that, and that's a very, what most would consider a very underexposed image. Pixel peeping is a good idea when you've done that kind of stuff, but honestly, it's recovered so much of that detail well, and I actually crushed a bit of the shadows in there anyway. I'm not seeing any noticeable noise patterns or anything developing here, which is fantastic. There are some areas which are completely black, I can see. If I do that, yeah, you can see there's a lot of areas here which are just completely black. I'm not adverse to that. That's why I do push my blacks up to the grey a bit, because that way they don't look as pitch black, you know. Especially when you print, that comes out quite nice. Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of this black hole thing here. I could easily go in with another adjustment brush or something and, you know, click there, do a bit of an exposure, try and bring that detail out, maybe just increase the shadows. You know, if I wanted it to be less of a black hole, you know, and then just use Alt and just get rid of the areas that I don't want to do, you know, get rid of that little bit of a black spot that's there, you know. But honestly, I wouldn't, I don't mind shadow. I think a bit of contrast is good. I don't mind there's a bit of mystery in there. But yeah, and then you could go through, now you've got a pretty good base image, it's got a bit of style to it. You could go crazy with you could go crazy with developing this more. Something, a little handy tip too, not for doing your final images, but for just let me unselect that. When you're a bit stuck and you don't know where to go with an image and you're like, I want to try something different, if you go to the filters or the profiles here from Adobe, they'll have, you know, their basic ones which you can mess around with, you know. They've got neutral, portrait, and these are just different ways. They're kind of like presets, right, but a little bit more advanced than that. These are presets from the camera. These ones I've got here, the camera matching ones. There's the Cine D, the Cine V, flat, monochrome. You know, these are the camera specific ones, but they do have these stylized filters just built into Lightroom. Now, I wouldn't recommend using most of these, except maybe the black and white ones. Some of the black and white ones are really good if you're going for a black and white image, just because they save you a bit of time, but only if you sort of shot black and white film before and you kind of know how black and white film should be treated. That's the only time I really recommend using those. But there's also some of these modern filters, you know, which will just apply a basic preset. And you can just look at it and it can just give you a bit of inspiration of, it's like, oh no, it looks really good with the contrast and the greens like that, and then go back and sort of apply that. Or you could just use these filters. I mean, no one's going to judge you. I mean, who's going to know anyway, right? I think it's just good to use them as a tool like this, you know. Once you've done your basic adjustments, then maybe look at some filters. You know, they can be a good way, especially speedily, to sort of match a whole bunch of shots from an event or something like that. But just be aware that it's only something you should really do at the end. I wouldn't recommend doing it to start with. I can see here that if I was to edit this further, I'd probably go for a look like this, and maybe add a bit of blue, because I like the way that the blues are popping that image a bit in that, if I was to sort of keep going, because yeah, it adding a bit of blue in the shadows and maybe bringing the blacks up a bit would be quite a good little step. Anyway, we'll move on from this image onto something a bit more interesting. Now, what I might do is actually take these settings, so I'll copy these settings and I'll paste them here. This one. Okay, which is quite nice. That's almost what I would do to that, pretty much. I make a couple other adjustments here. Would I crop this? I don't know. This bit here is probably a bit distracting. So I might crop it like that. Yeah, see, that's quite nice. That's quite nice. That brings the detail out. I probably bring the exposure up a little bit. Maybe bring those shadows in, the highlights. Get a little bit of pop going on, a bit of contrast. Push the clarity. Get a bit of texture to get the sharpness going. Yeah. I think you could do all sorts of other crazy things there, but I like that. That's a nice, simple shot. Nice. You know, I don't need to do anything else to it. And that's all from just doing this one, because they're in the exact same scene. I believe that's this log, or it might be another one that was over here. I think it was that one that I've taken this photo of here. Yeah. Yeah, it's that thing of like, I haven't done a lot, but you can see just by those changes, see all these sort of browns and boring leaf bits that are a bit whatever. With those color changes that we made before, where I pushed everything a bit to the reds and stuff like that, it's given it this nice little kind of contrast of green and red, and it's quite good. And this does require a bit of, this is one of those things you get with practice. It's like, you know, when you start out, it's fine, use the color wheel. You know, nobody's gonna show it. I still use a color wheel. I have an app on my phone which shows me various color harmonies and things like that. Very useful at times when you're stuck. But yeah, knowing your color, and just a quick way I can show you down here, you can see the on the color wheels they've got, you know, so there's all sorts of different types of color theory, and I don't want to go through them all here, but you know, a standard one is when you've got your opposing colors, so you know, tealish, so teal and orange, you know, kind of match with each other, you know, yellows and blues, greens, reds, magentas, that kind of thing. So because this is a really tealish sort of, you can see this is the theory in motion, right? Because it's a sort of greeny, tealy kind of color I've applied to the leaves, and then the leaves, the moss, and then the leaves, I've sort of done a very sort of reddish color to them, that those are blending quite nicely, and that's because it's just following that basic color theory. And that's like, again, it's a whole topic unto itself. Maybe I should do a video just about color theory. Long video. I'm sure there's plenty of other videos there if you want to look them up. But yeah, a basic knowledge of your color theory and stuff. And I find a lot of this is less, it's more important what colors you take away than what colors you add. You know what I mean? It's more about removing rather than adding to, you know, and shifting things to balance it out, especially in an environment where you don't have total control over all your colors, or don't have total control over what things are. You know, it's not a portrait studio shoot, or it's not a product shot, you know, where you can't be very specific. Using these little tools can really help bring things together. All right. I'm definitely not keeping that one. Another quick portrait one here. So we'll see here though, if I apply the preset to this, I mean, some people like that look. I don't. I hate the pink and red tones, but you can see here that it's not the right thing. But the one we did for Vince here, if I take these settings again and apply them to that photo, it probably won't look too bad when Lightroom decides to update itself. Okay, it's a bit cold, but that's because obviously the color temperature in this situation was different. Sorry, I can try an automatic white balance there. That's done a terrible job. Bring my exposure up. There's a lot of this blue and sort of magenta here, so it hasn't done what I thought it would do there. The light's obviously so different, and that's because there's so much influence in what changes your color. But you know, the reflection off the rocks here is going to change where his skin tones are. It's obviously given it this weird sort of magenta-y sort of shift, and it's done a few weird things there, unfortunately. So it hasn't worked as well as I thought it would, but that's okay. I will correct that. He feels very blue, so I'm definitely going to warm it up. That's nicer, and then I'm going to push a bit towards green, not that far. Warm it up a bit. Another good rule of thumb is, these two, your temperature and your tint, they should sort of sit like this, where they're sort of on opposite ends of each other, not in exact positions or anything. Like, it's fine for the blue to be all the way over here and the magenta to be only a little bit over here. But I mean in terms of, if you push blue to the left, you should probably push, sorry, if you push temperature to the left towards blue, you should probably push your tint to the right. So have them in opposite directions to each other as a general good way to balance your colors out. You know, so if you notice it's doing weird things, like I'm seeing it's still a bit green here, so I probably put a little bit more magenta in there. Maybe not so much, you know. There we go. And again, because I've done these color adjustments too, it's very much influencing what I'm doing. This is, you should generally start by doing your temperature first, but that's okay. So I can see here that I want to adjust some of my hues. Okay, so you can see I'm having a bit of a problem where I'd have to isolate something here, because I want to adjust my leaves so they're a bit greener, right? And take the yellow out, but that's influencing this. That's taking all the yellow out of here, and it's influencing his skin a bit, because there's some green, there's some yellow reflecting off the rock here. So my yellows, when I adjust them, are creating a weird effect, which is giving us this muddy, greeny, gross sort of look, which is, yeah, not pleasant. Not happy with it. I'm going to push this anyway. I'm going to just ignore it for now, and I'll get back to it. I think the greens are probably a bit too saturated, a bit too distracting, and maybe a bit too bright. The yellows could be darker, and the oranges don't need to be quite so bright either. Or the reds. The purples that's on his face, which is obviously being cast by the light. I just want to shift the hue of those purples towards red a bit. Yeah, there's some sort of weird reflection on his face there that's messing with me, but it's also probably something I've done here. Definitely weird. This is a good chance to use your direct adjustment thing, so you can sort of select that color and say, where is that? What is that? Something I've done, or is that a natural thing? I think it's just some part of the environment. I think it might be my blues. Yeah, because see, that's the blue reflections of the sky. Right. Okay, that makes more sense now. So what I'll do is I'll go back a few steps. Yeah, before I was pushing things too much. What I do here is just try and take the saturation down on that a bit. Maybe up a bit. Okay, adjust the hue of my blues and the saturation of my blues. Hold on a second. Push them a bit. Definitely having a weird effect. Warm up this. Okay, there we go. That's created a nice skin tone, but it's ruined everything else. That's what I say. Like, for an ordinary shot like this, I wouldn't spend much time doing. I really wouldn't, because it's going to take a bit of effort to get rid of that. But a quick thing I can do to try and quickly get rid of it, if I'm, pressed for time, or in a situation like this where I just kind of want to move on, is you can, again, use the adjustment brush. You can use a fine adjustment on the hue here, and try and push it in the direction you prefer it to be. Try and push it more towards an orange, If fine adjustment is too fine, then you can do it a bit more, to try and get those colors to match in that way. Or a simpler thing you can do is just go, well, I can see that it's a bit blue and I just want to warm it up a bit, right? And get rid of that magenta-y sort of look that it's got on there, which is giving it a sort of brighter appearance. So I just want to bring up the exposure. That's a fairly quick way. So I'll just keep fixing those little elements on his face there to balance that out. Okay, it's doing weird stuff. But I might just do his whole beard hair actually, because that is looking nice. Like that. And then just tidy up my mask a bit. Get a big brush. Hold Alt just so that that edge is nice and feathered. Okay. Bring the saturation of it down a bit. Just so it's not as noticeable. It's doing some weird things with the highlights. So bring those down just a tad too. Okay. There we go. So that's sort of fixed that issue. That's a quick way of doing it. It's just because there's the reflection on the sky there. And I probably have to do it to his arms too. The good thing is that if I just go and select that same thing, and I was to go, oh, there's another spot like that, I can just paint it on his arms. Okay, just to correct that little issue there. Okay, and spend a bit more time, tidying it up. Make sure I get all these things. There we go. Okay, definitely noticing that the oranges are very saturated at the moment though, so I'm going to pull those down just a tad. And there we go. Much nicer. It's good skin tones now. Good skin tones. Took a bit more work than I thought it was going to take. I think overall the saturation can come out a little bit. Okay. I was talking about those greens before, which is before I noticed the problem with the skin. So I would do another adjustment brush here, so a separate one to the one I did before. You can have a bunch of these. I'm not sure there is a limit. And again, I would paint the adjustment brush. And then just to get rid of that greenish sort of tone, I can try just pumping some magenta in there. Okay. Yeah, that seems to have done a trick. Maybe go for some blue. Cool it down, or maybe warm it up. Depends on which way I want to go. And again, maybe make it less distracting by pulling some of that saturation down. Okay. Cool. Okay, and that's just gotten rid of that green there. It's a subtle change, but if we go back to before and then after, you can see it's just corrected that. And again, it's balancing it out. It's making it so there's none of that weirdness, those different color tones. And then I'll do a crop on this because it's too much dead space on the right here. I don't want to crop it too much though. I might just do it like something like that. I like that the space above him, he's looking up. I kind of like that. That tone to it. I am noticing there's a bit of blue on his shirt here. I wonder if I can quickly fix that with some saturation. I think that might mess with a few things. Just to bring that down. Looks quite nice, but has it ruined any skin tones? Let me just... Always got to be careful. You always got to make sure that you're not messing something else up. But no, that's quite nice. That's done a pretty good job there. And again, it's just taking that distraction of that blue on his shirt out that sort of helps that pop. That comes out quite nice. And I mean, we've actually done a lot more to that than I thought we would. We've gone from this to this, right? And it's the power of editing. And I guess I'll take a moment here at the almost 2-hour mark to mention that as much as I'm obviously showing you editing and photo editing, I'm a big advocate of trying to get this stuff right in camera. But at the same time, in this exact situation, what I was doing was just sort of casually taking photos. We were walking around. When I saw cool stuff, I would take a photo of it. I wasn't wanting to mess around with my exposure settings too much. Like I said, not changing lenses all the time, all that sort of stuff. And you shouldn't rely on post-production to save you. You shouldn't rely on the ability of a camera to save these sort of things. But it's also something that it's like when I took this image, I was able to capture the moment because I saw Aaron was looking up with his camera in his hand, and I thought that's a nice shot, and my camera was not set to take a photo of him because he was in the shadow. It's obviously set my exposure was not really balanced for him. It was sort of balanced for the sky over here because I was taking a shot somewhere else. But it was a nice moment. So when I captured the moment, and I knew when I looked at it in camera, I'm like, yeah, I can absolutely do this to it in post-production with fairly minimal effort and really bring it up and make it look nice. So yeah, that was that's the sort of thing. It's like you don't rely on post, but it is there, and it can really make an image pop a little bit more. And the more I look at this image, the more I think maybe there is too much effort. That's a bit better. Still getting that sort of glancing up thing though. Yeah, so you shouldn't rely on it, but it can sort of save you. Okay, this is another example. So what I might do, just because we're running a bit long, is I might skip ahead to just quickly go through what I was talking about with these. So I'll pick with the bracketed exposures just to quickly cover this. So try and pick one that I think is going to have the least other problems with it, or that I think is going to benefit the most from it. Or maybe I'll just pick a nice simple shot. But I also want something that's got nice composition, so that it does, you know, we don't get distracted by the lack of composition. Maybe this one. Maybe this one. Let's go with this one, okay? So I'll quickly show you what you can do. So you select, so if you've got 5 bracket exposures, you can select all the images, okay? And you can do stacking. Sorry, you can do stacking where you can group them together, obviously, but what you really want to do is you want to do a photo merge, okay? And there's different options, HDR panorama and HDR panorama, and there is HDR is the one we want to go with here. Now, Lightroom will do some calculations for you to sort of figure out, it'll try to merge these different images together. It'll look at all the images, it'll also auto align, as you can see there, and it'll automatically apply some settings. So you can see right away that it's done. Look at how much detail we have in here. It's got that typical kind of HDR look to it that I don't like. But if you take off the auto settings, that goes away, because the auto settings is just, it'll automatically make some adjustments to these settings on the right hand side here that you can change if you like, in order to, you know, sort of show you what it should look like. You can do that. There's also the ghosting, right? So at the moment I've got it set to none. Ghosting is when there's any sort of, you know, weird, you know, differences on edges and things like that. Like the water's probably going to cause some ghosting. I think there's actually not a great deal of ghosting on this image, but let's try doing some high-end anti-ghosting and see what that does. I think it'll mostly affect the water droplets. And once it's done processing, you can actually click this little box here, which will show us where it's applying this deghosting effect. And it's just trying to get rid of things like, you know, a little bit, maybe there's a little bit of motion blur in one of them, or something moved or whatever. It'll try and remove those things for you. I think for this shot, it's not going to be necessary. I probably should have just done low. Okay, so yeah, so you can see these are the areas that have some sort of ghosting. And from what I can tell, it's like, yes, these are the areas where there's significant movement. So obviously this leaf here has moved a bit. These leaves have moved in between exposures, all that sort of stuff. But if I look at it, you can see it's a bit sharper in those areas now. There's a bit less softness than there was before, than when I had it set to none. Right, so you can see it was a bit softer. It's not a great deal of difference. I'm going to leave it off. And I'm going to take the settings off as well. Yeah, but it's as simple as that to do photo merge in Lightroom. And it's really quite good. You can absolutely do this better with a bit more time and a bit more effort in something like Photoshop, where you can actually take each of the exposures and, you know, just paint the areas where you want. You know, just use this photo for all your shadows, just use this photo for all your highlights and your midtones. You can really sort of make those kinds of adjustments. But for quick, simple, casual stuff like this, I don't mind doing Lightroom's built-in tool here. So it's created a new image for us. You can see here it's, well, you probably can't see, it's very small text, but HDR.gng. So it's created a high dynamic range version of this image for us that we can now edit. So this is all those 5 exposures, so we'll get way more push and dynamic range out of this than we would get if we were to do it with a single image. So it is that simple, and it does give us the ability to make that sky entirely just blue, whereas if I was to try and do that on say on this image, for instance, if I was to try and bring down just the highlights on this, it's going to prove me wrong, isn't it? No, it's not. Okay, good. You can see how it's got these white spots because of the flaring from there and all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of what it gives you the ability to do. So it gives you to sort of get the best of both worlds. It's not perfect. You can see there's a bit of that ghosting on these branches here, on these areas. It's not always going to be perfect, but it's definitely allowed me to capture a lot more of the detail in this shot than I otherwise would have. I can really pump those shadows. It'll give me less noise as well when I start pushing shadows and stuff. It's still a bit noisy, but yeah, even with the shadows all the way pushed up, there's very little noise. Whereas if I was to go to this shot and then try and push my shadows all the way up, noise. Just noise. Like, just rubbish. Wouldn't use it. A completely unusable image there, right? Even with noise reduction, you're not really going to save that too well. So that's the real advantage of doing bracketing, and it's quite a good technique. What I don't like is that there is a bit of that flare in here when I do the exposure, which is a bit of a shame. Maybe if I was to take the ghosting off, that may have been what that was looking at there actually, and that might be the difference that I'm not noticing. But that's okay. I don't mind it too much, and I can mitigate it just by playing with my settings. And again, I would use sort of the same kind of settings. I'm going to take the clarity down so it's less busy, but bring the texture up so there's still detail in there. Get a nice look out of it. Get my little S-curve going. Okay. Push that there, saturation. Okay. And again, just go through and do all my color adjustments. Another quick tip too, if you're really happy with a set of colors and really happy with how you've done your colors, like I was quite happy with how we did the colors on those images before, right? Like I liked the balance that we found with, I've turned off my filters. I really like the balance of colors we sort of got on one of these shots here. So if I want to try and replicate just that, what I can do is I can copy my settings. I can just go check none to uncheck everything. And just take the color, or just take the the white balance, maybe, because the white balance is influencing the color as well. Maybe just take those 2 settings, maybe not the white balance. Depends on which way you go. I don't think I'll take the white balance, but just take the color or any settings that you feel like. Okay, go to your image, right? And then just go paste, and it will only paste instead of changing everything about the image, it'll keep all the settings that we've done here that I just did, but it'll just apply those color adjustments. So I'll get that same sort of look, those reds going in there, and I'll get that same sort of adjustment. There's that lens flare. I was wondering what that was. It's a lens flare. That's what's bugging me. Okay, it'll just do that. Now I can see here that the blue is a bit distracting in this composition. It's a shame. I might spend more time on it, but it's too cyan. It's way too cyan, but obviously because there wasn't any blue in that last image, I didn't really notice it that much. So now what I can do is just go back to my hue and make that a little bit less of that sort of cyan, or maybe take the saturation up a bit, or down a bit so it's less distracting, and mess around with that, because it's not quite the same. Or just bring the luminance up so it's nice and bright. A whole bunch of different things I could do there. I am going to go back and fix that because I don't care about the flare. It looks better when it's a wider perspective. But yeah, this is an example, of, this would be the exposure I would have started with. As a quick test, what we could do is I could take all the settings here. So I'll just check all of them. And then apply it to the middle exposure, which is generally what I would have been saying, okay, this is my best. So I can compare them, and see, and this will show me whether it was really worth doing those two things, right? And honestly, not a great deal of difference. Not a great deal of difference. I get a bit more of this water spray here. If I look in the shadows of this one, yeah, I can see there's a bit more noise in there, in those deep shadows. It just hasn't captured that detail than there is in this one. But to be honest, I probably didn't need to bracket it as much as I thought. It probably would have been fine just straight out of the camera, but still, it's a good technique to try out, and I definitely recommend it. Cool. Yeah, I mean, those are sort of it. I mean, we've hit the 2-hour mark, so it might be time for me to wind this back a bit. Unless, I don't know, anybody's still watching. Is anyone still watching? If anyone's still watching, and they have any questions before I finish, then please feel free to put them in the chat now. I hope I've explained things enough. I hope you've sort of learned things throughout my 2 hours of just blathering. It's one of those things that's quite difficult for me because this is very slow. Like, I've gotten almost no work done here in a 2-hour period. I probably would have finished this in half an hour, maybe an hour, if I'd have just sat here and worked on these by themselves. But that's okay, as long as I've sort of helped something or kind of explained things to people, then all the better for it. But yeah, I hope I've also sort of demystified a few things about shooting in this kind of harsh light. I don't think you should be afraid of it, especially tip is to do kind of stuff like this. This is really to shoot, instead of shooting your big wide landscapey sort of scenes, try shooting different things. Try focusing on little details, or try shooting up into the trees and seeing how that treats you. Try doing things like bracketing. Experiment with it. I see a lot of talk and a lot of photographers who will just look at a scene and go, it's like, it's the light's too harsh. I don't want to shoot here. And it's definitely situations where it's absolutely going to be true, right? Where you can't quite capture everything, and it's not quite what you wanted. There's always going to be those situations, but I see it a lot, and I think it's often to the detriment of your work if you sort of just look at a scene and say, well, I can't shoot this, there's too much contrast, there's nothing I can do with this. And like, there's always something you can find. There's always a little detail. There's always a log with a leaf on it, or a spider that's sitting in the sun, or your friend doing something stupid. Just while I do my closing remarks, I'm definitely going to try and recover this, actually, because I do want to fix this one, and see how I go. But yeah, like, I think it can be too easy to look at a scene like this and say, oh, it's too high contrast. I can't recover all these details. I'm not going to be able to do anything here. It's like, zoom in, bring a flash. I actually was meant to bring a flash with me on this. I thought I did until we actually got down to this little part of the ravine, this little waterfall here, and I realized, I'm like, oh, I didn't bring my flash. I actually took it out just before I left, because I thought, I'm not going to use this. I'm not going to use this flash. You can see here it's recovered the detail, okay, and it does look like there isn't much ghosting. I might put the anti-ghosting on though, just because I know he did move, obviously, because he's a human being. But yeah, I almost brought that flash with me, but then I took it out at the last minute, because I thought, I'm not going to need this thing, Whereas if I'd have had it, it would have been absolutely useful in this, because I could have used the flash with a little dome diffuser, and popped it in that left-hand side here that was all in shadow, and just lit it up a little bit more and got a more dynamic scene out of it. Because it does require a fairly powerful flash to do that. I just have it. It's a cheap one. It's a Yongnuo 564 from memory, or 464. I'm useless. I can never remember the name of the flash, but it's a cheap flash. It's wireless, but it's also very powerful. It's almost too powerful most of the time for portraiture and stuff. It just blows things away, and I rarely use it. I really only use it as like a backlight or a background light when I need to pop a lot of light in, or if I'm outdoors, because it's quite good for that. You do need a bit of power because your shutter is going to be pretty reduced, and you're not going to be able to balance things out too much there. But I think it's good to try and experiment with things. Push those little things together. So it's going to auto merge these. You can see here it's creating the HDR. It'll give you a little bit of a timeline there. Yeah, I just think there's so much we can do in post, and obviously number one tip, which I haven't even mentioned yet. How have I not mentioned this? Shoot it in RAW. If you're in a high contrast situation, always shoot in RAW. I'm not a person who's going to tell you that you should never shoot in JPEG. I mean, I personally never shoot JPEG, but there's a lot of good reasons to shoot in a JPEG. Like, I'm not going to tell people that they should never, ever do it. It does have some very practical uses. Hopefully I can just apply that preset. Let's see what we get out of that. Not too bad. Don't think I like the colors here though, and some of the detail that's been lost. Yeah, it's too much on this image. But yeah, I'm not an always shoot RAW kind of guy. There are plenty of situations where shooting JPEG is very useful, particularly if you're doing press photography and stuff like that. You need to deliver images fast. You're gonna have to shoot in JPEG. If you need to transfer things straight away, you're at least gonna have to shoot RAW and JPEG, right? So there's plenty of reasons to shoot in just JPEG. But in this situation, high contrast, I don't know, not shooting in RAW, you're gonna have a lot of trouble doing these kinds of edits. And nothing I'm sort of showing off here is very unique to Lightroom either. Any of the other there's plenty of other competitors to Lightroom. I use Lightroom because of the workflow. I use Lightroom because I can right click on this photo right now and go edit in Photoshop, and boom, it does it. It links back together. It's fantastic. That's one of the big reasons I still use it. But there's plenty of reasons to use Photoshop. There's also plenty of reasons to use other software as well. There's a multitude of ways that you can go about it. And it's not all based on that sort of thing. So you can see I never quite got the exposure right here on that. It was always blown out because you can see it's like muddying those details, but that's okay. I can definitely work on this and recover it. This is a good example where I'm going to have to do a bit of noise reduction. You can see there's just not enough detail in the shadows. He's just too deep in those shadows, so I would have to do some noise reduction. Noise reduction, again, you hold that thing and you do Alt, it'll make it white and it'll sort of reduce that noise for you. There's a lot of colors, so I'm going to pull that up as well. One of the biggest things you usually lose when you pull out the noise is some level of detail, so you lose sharpness when you pull out noise. So what I would do to compensate is just do the sharpening, just get a bit of that detail back, lose that, but you can see it's very muddy. I'd have to work this. I'm going to have to work this image a bit more, I think. Yeah, I'm going to have to isolate him a bit, just do some basic exposures, settings, maybe stylize it a bit more so that it's less noticeable. Do some black and white. Yeah, I think black and white's going to work really well, actually. Do some black and white to it, isolate things, all that kind of stuff. But, it's a good moment and I've got the image and I'm very happy about that. But all that said, you don't need to use something advanced like bracketing. You know, you can just do really simple edits, you know, with a single shot like this. Just some of those edits that we did before. Just some of those basic things, just pushing your highlights, pushing your shadows, touching around with your colors, you know, all of that sort of stuff. Exposing for your highlights, and you can really recover a lot of the detail. It's not all lost, and there's so many different ways you can recover these types of images and get good stuff. Alright, so I'll wrap it up here. Thank you for watching, everybody who watched. If you want to see more like this, or if you have any, you know, requests or something more interesting for me to do. I know this wasn't the most interesting topic, but I did want to sort of start live streaming and test the system out, and I shot these on the weekend. I thought it was a mildly interesting topic. It probably wasn't as interesting as I thought, but it was something a bit different as well, which, you know, it's, I mean, how many times can I, you know, edit portraits? You know, not everyone does this sort of stuff, so I thought it was worthwhile having a bit of fun with. I hope you get some insight at least, and if there's anything at all, any other questions, you can put them in the comments. The comments obviously keep going even once you're not live anymore. To put any questions in the comments, any future topics you'd like to me to address. I'll probably start posting some of these images on Instagram. Please, you know, like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed it. I have all my stuff is linked in the description below, but I also have a Discord server which I might start to link to if people are interested, if you want to sort of talk more one-on-one. I've got some other stuff planned. I want to do a bit more video content on this channel as well, so stay tuned for a bit of that. And yeah, anyway, I gotta wrap this up because I'm blathering now. So thank you again to everybody who's been watching. Definitely hope it's been an enjoying thing for you, and I will catch you all in the next one. So thank you again.